Hello and welcome back to my channel and part 4 of my Walking Dead rewrite. This episode will go over season 4 in its entirety, so let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. Season 4, Episode 1, 30 Days Without an Incident. Season 4 will start out the same way it did canonically, but at Woodbury instead of the prison. The sickness would still happen and Patrick would still turn. Season 4, Episode 2, Infected. This episode will follow the group's reactions to the sickness. The difference is that Karen and Glenn wouldn't get sick, but Sophia would. The sickness wouldn't be as bad with Dr. S., Herschel, and Milton. Season 4, Episode 3, Isolation. This episode would be the same, minus Tyrese being angry about Karen's death. Season 4, Episode 4, Indifference. This episode would go the same, but without Carol. Rick would go on the supply run alone and would bring the two people they met back to Woodbury. Season 4, Episode 5, Internment. This episode would mostly be the same. Season 4, Episode 6, Live Bait. This episode would also be the same, minus the scene of the governor destroying Woodbury since the group still lives there. Season 4, Episode 7, Dead Weight. This episode would be the same until the end when the governor would take T-Dog and Herschel. Season 4, Episode 8, Too Far Gone. This episode would be the same until the governor shows up to Woodbury with T-Dog and Herschel. He wouldn't have Michonne's blade, but instead, he would have the red machete that Rick would later get. The speech would remain mostly the same until when the governor says liar, he swings the machete at T-Dog, killing him instantly. The battle would start when Lily shows up, Megan wouldn't be dead, and they would see what the governor did and would decide to run. The governor would break down the wall and get into Woodbury. He would go into his old office and see Sophia, who is still sick, lying there. He would walk up to her and pull the trigger, killing her. Most of everything that happened would be the same, but Tara would start fighting and end up getting killed by Shane. The first group to leave would be the people on the bus, including Dr. S., Sam, and all the background characters, and Oscar. The bus would explode down the road, killing all of them. Before the bus leaves, Milton would be heading that way, but would get shot in the leg by the governor before getting distracted by Rick. Glenn would see this and would carry Milton out of Woodbury. The next scene would be Herschel looking for his daughters. He wouldn't find them, but instead Lizzie, Mika, and a recovering from the sickness Sasha, and Judith. He would help them get out of Woodbury, praying his daughters all right. Speaking of Herschel's daughters, they would escape with Tyrese, Karen, and Bob. The last group to leave would be Rick, Shane, and Carl. This would happen when the governor and Rick would start fighting. The governor would be choking Rick when Shane walks up behind him and shoots him with his shotgun. Rick would get up and start looking for Carl and Judith, with Shane following behind him after he spits on the governor's body. Rick would find the bloody stroller with Carl near it sobbing. The three would get up and out of Woodbury, ending the first half of the season. Season 4, Episode 9, After. This episode would start with Rick, Shane, and Carl running across the house they found. They would get in pretty easy. Rick would still pass out, but with Shane there, Carl wouldn't go scavenging alone. At the end of the episode, we would see our first hand at the Claimers when we see a knife hand enter the screen. Season 4, Episode 10, Inmates. This episode starts with Herschel, Sasha, Lizzie, Mika, and Judith. They'd be on the train tracks when a couple walkers come. With Herschel having one foot, Sasha being sick, and 3 kids, it would seem that they would die. But all of a sudden, all get their heads chopped off. The group was saved by Michonne. We would then cut to Glenn and Milton escaping Woodbury. They are on a road when Milton falls down. As soon as this happens, an armed vehicle rolls up. Glenn asks them for help as 3 people hop out: Abraham, Rosita, and Eugene. Season 4, Episode 11, Claimed. This episode would pick up where we left off last episode, with Glenn and Milton. They would be in the back of a truck. When Milton wakes up, Glenn would ask them to stop and find Maggie. This group would be the same, but with Milton replacing Tara, as well as the group of Tyrese, Karen, Bob, Maggie, and Beth. They would continue Maggie's search for Glenn. We would then find Rick, Shane, and Carl leaving the house because they ran out of supplies. They would be on the train tracks when Rick would see the terminus sign. He would look back and tell Carl and Shane and would see them bouncing on the tracks. They would continue to terminus until getting stopped by the claimers. This encounter would be the same as in reality until Daryl and Merle would see what is happening. They would fire at the claimers, killing all of them except Joe, who would get his throat ripped out by Rick. Merle and Daryl would accompany Rick, Shane, and Carl to terminus. Season 4, Episode 12 to 13. These episodes would just be character and relationship buildings heading to terminus. Maggie, Bob, Beth, Karen, and Tyrese would be found by Glenn, Milton, Abraham, Eugene, and Rosita. Season 4, Episode 14, The Grove. The Grove would be very similar to our timeline, but when Lizzie kills Mika, Herschel would insist that they leave her instead of killing her. The group complies, and in the middle of the night leave Lizzie in the house and make their way to Terminus. Season 4, Episode 15, Us. This episode would be more character building. Season 4, Episode 16, A. This episode would be the same, but at the end, Shane would get shot in the shoulder. The group gets put in a train car, and Rick would say they don't know who they're messing with to end season.